Continuous deployment. Okay, so who I am, I'm Matt White. I've worked with a lot of you before. I currently work at Gold Star. They're based out of Pasadena, but I'm the one remote dev here in Utah, and I have a coworker here who's speaking right after me. What Gold Star does, we sell half-price tickets for live entertainment, and most of our app these days is in Rails, but we still have some legacy Perl that we're transitioning away from. Believe it or not, our boss had a hard time finding Perl developers to continue building the Perl app. Go figure, I don't know how that happened, but anyway, so he decided to switch to Rails, and it's been a lot better since then. So I want to talk about what continuous deployment is. At Gold Star, we do something close to continuous deployment. I wouldn't say we're perfect at it, but we're working on getting better. And so this continuous deployment is nothing that's new. It's something that a lot of people have been doing for a while. But I've noticed that a lot of Rails shops aren't really doing it for some reason. We started doing it, I don't know, probably close to a year ago. And it's been an amazing journey to get there, how much better things are since we got there. So some of you may have heard of Timothy Fitz. He's one of the big proponents of this. And this is how he defines it. This is how they do it at Etsy. He says, this is the overview definition. You continuously integrate, commit early and often, commit automatically, or on commit automatically run all your tests, and if the tests pass, deploy to the cluster automatically, so you're not actually clicking deploy all the time. I think at Etsy they actually do click deploy still, but where he worked before they didn't, it just went automatically. And if the deploy succeeds, repeat. So if this is being done automatically, you could be deploying 30, 40, 50 times a day, depending on how fast it takes your test to run and how much you're committing. So I just want to take a quick survey of how often all of us here are deploying. Who here is deploying more than once a day? Oh, good. We got about a quarter of you. Who's deploying about once a day-ish, maybe 3 or 4 times a week? Okay, so that's still okay. Who's doing less than that? Okay, you guys are the ones that really need to listen to this, because you guys are the ones dealing with the headaches that we no longer deal with at Gold Star because of it. So I want to talk about our journey, how we got there, and how it's actually not that difficult. Because most of the things that you need to do, you either already are doing or you should be doing. And so if you work on those things, you'll get there really easy. So the things that we needed at Gold Star to get to continuous deployment, and I'll just mention now, the one thing that we're not doing is kind of like Etsy. We're not automatically deploying and automatically rolling back if we blow things up. We're still doing that manually, but it's a one-line cap deploy, so it's really simple still. So we needed a simplified release process. I mean, I'm sure some of you working at bigger companies have a release process that's ridiculous, and it takes weeks or months or longer. And you have code freezes and all these stakeholders doing QA and whatever, and it just takes a long time. So that was the first thing we had to do, is simplify that, make it as quick as possible. And so we had to ask ourselves the question, what is the least amount of things that we need to do to get code to the server? I mean, what's holding us back? Is it people? Is it processes? Find out what those things are, eliminate them, and move on from there. And the next thing we needed was thorough testing. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you have 100% test coverage. What it means is that you have confidence in your release, whatever that means for you. And so for most people that talk about continuous deployment, including us, it means you have tests that do what your users do. And I have a little bit more about that later, but if you can work on that, you'll get a lot closer to having confidence. And then continuous integration, hopefully everybody's doing this too, right? Automatically. You have something that's checking your build and making sure everything's green. Monitoring, so you need to know if things have broken, and if they do break, why. And you need to know quickly too. Okay, so I want to go into each one of these points and what they each mean. So, like I said, when you want to simplify your release process, you mostly just need to ask, who is holding us back? I mean, what is it a person? And if it is a person, you need to convince them that your release process is quite painful. I mean, if it's something that you've just grown used to, maybe you don't even know how painful it is. But when you have a simple release process and all that pain goes away, then you realize what you've been going through all that time. And so you need to convince those people that for the sake of sanity and for being able to pivot quickly on your new features, you need to have your releases not be like this. Okay, because this is how a lot of releases are, and I've noticed at companies that I've worked at, it's just like a big deal. You got people staying up till odd hours of the morning trying to get everything ready, and everyone's freaking out, and that's kind of what it's like, okay? So who's ever had a release that as soon as you deployed it, things just went crazy? So it's probably everybody, right? You've had things go crazy. And who's ever had a release that went like that was really hard to roll back and get back to where you were before? Okay, the fewer hands, but I'm sure you all know what that's like, more or less. And so part of the reason you want to make your deploy process simple is so that you can do that quick and easy. You can deploy easy, you can roll it back easy, and you don't have those nightmare days where everyone's freaking out and staying at work, 2-3 days straight, sleeping under their desk, trying to figure out what's going on. So if this is how you're working with branches like this, I know a lot of people probably are. That's probably what you feel like. You may or may not know it, but that's probably how it is. And so over at GitHub, they've talked about this a lot, is their Git flow, or their flow works just like this. They have one branch, master, and then when they want to build a new feature, they branch off of that. And then once they're finished with the feature, they make a pull request. If you're using GitHub, this is extremely easy to do, which is what we do at Gold Star. And then it's nice, right? Because then you just get your pull request approved, you merge into master, it goes to CI, and everyone's happy. So that's one way that you can simplify your process today. Get working on that because people don't necessarily need to know that you're branching differently. They don't really care. So thorough testing. There's been a lot of talk about testing. Testing is one of the biggest important parts of continuous deployment. Like I said before, it's not necessarily 100% test coverage. You don't need to be freaking out if archive is only at 99%. But you just need to know that your tests are doing what your users do, so that when you do deploy, you know that people can still sign up for your service, or they can buy things or whatever. So we use Cucumber for that, and it runs all the JavaScript on the page just to make sure that it's getting the same experience that users do. And so when that fails, we don't deploy. It's that simple. And your tests need to be fast and efficient, because if you have CI running and it's taking an hour, 2 hours, I'm sure nobody has tests that take that long to run, right? Then you have a problem, because if you're deploying 3 or 4 times a day, then pretty much you're just waiting for CI all day long. So I just want to give you some quick ideas. This is a whole different talk if you want to learn more about testing. This could be a whole different talk that someone could write. Some easy ways to speed up your tests: profile them. I know in our spec this is as easy as doing -- profile. I think in mini test it's the same, isn't it? Someone know? I think it's really easy as well to profile. I'm not sure about test unit. I'm not sure if it does or not, but you can always use Ruby prof to do that if you want. Don't disguise integration tests as unit tests. This is a big offense I see in testing. Where people they call it a unit test, but really it's doing a lot of database queries, and maybe it's testing objects against other objects to see how they interact. Those are more integration tests, and you're probably duplicating your tests, which is avoiding test duplication. That was one way we sped up our test suite quite a bit. Is we had a lot of we have like a unit test that would test what models are doing to each other, which is not really a unit test. And then we had a functional test that was testing from the controller level and doing the same thing again. Then we had an integration test that was also doing that. And so once we removed that duplication, some of those really slower tests, especially in the Cucumber suite, went away, and they were a lot faster. Create fewer objects. If you're using Factory Girl, you're probably offending pretty badly, because Factory Girl by default saves to the database, and if you're doing a unit test, it's probably more than what you need, because you don't need to be testing active record. Load dependencies as needed, which is related as well. If you can do a test on a unit test that's loading a gem without the gem, that's going to be a much faster test. It's going to be a lot less heavy. And don't test or use Rails if you don't have to. There's been a lot of talks about this lately too. People that just don't even load it, and their tests run like blazingly fast. If you can do that, that's great. If you can't, then whatever. But one habit that we've gotten into, at least some of us at Gold Star, is we don't even use active record or anything Rails related until we have to use it. So you don't just do Rails G model, make a new model, and then it automatically hooks up active record and creates a migration for you. You just create the plain old Ruby object, and then once you need active record, you plug it in. But now we have quite a few objects that or classes that don't even use active record, and the tests run those like literally in a thousandth of a second. They're extremely fast. So continuous integration. Here's a Jenkins little logo. We use Jenkins. It was pretty easy to set up. And whatever you want to use, it doesn't really matter as long as it works. But CI is pretty critical for continuous deployment. You need to know if your build is green or not. And so it needs to be really fast, though. And I was just talking with my coworker, BJ Clark, about this, about how our CI server is actually the fastest server at our company right now. Our database server might be slightly faster, but it's faster than all the app servers. And so this was our old one. This is what our old one was. It was a quad-core AMD, 16 gigs of RAM, it was in rack space, cloud, and it took 30 minutes to run the tests, which is way too long, okay? Because none of you take 30 minutes to run tests, right? Because we already talked about that. So what we did was we said, okay, if we're going to deploy 4, 5, 6 times a day, we need this to go faster. So we bought a new box, 16 core, 32 gigs of RAM, solid state drive. Now it's 7 minutes, okay? So that, it was a little pricey. I think it was like $4,000 or something like that, but it's worth every penny because now we're not waiting, 23 extra minutes for CI every day, multiple times per day. It just runs 7 minutes, which is enough time to run to the bathroom or something. So that was something that paid off really big for us. And then make use of your multiple CPU cores. When you run tests by default, they run on one core. And there's probably nobody in here that's running on one core anymore. I mean, every new computer these days has got multiple cores. Like our CI's got 16, so we try to use all 16 of them. And there's two easy ways to do this. We use parallel tests. If you've never seen this before, this is really easy to set up. It's like dead simple, as easy as it can be. You just have to make a configuration change and then run rake parallel prepare, and it does everything for you. And so this makes it so all your tests run on multiple cores. Instead of if we ran our test suite on one core, it'd probably take about 45 minutes or so to an hour on this machine here, which is pretty fast too, 4 cores. But I can run it in about 7 or 8 minutes, 9 minutes or something like that. So it's, it speeds things up considerably. And then Hydra, if your suite is like out of control, huge, Hydra is an option you might want to look at because you can actually distribute your tests across multiple machines. And I think there are probably other solutions out there too that I'm not pointing out, but if you do a little research, you can find those too. So yeah, running in parallel is another big payoff. Monitoring, if you are deploying your code and the first person that's telling you on a regular basis that something is broken is a user or even an employee that's not on your team, like on your dev team or ops team, then your monitoring is broken. So something's not being monitored correctly. So something automatic like this robot should be freaking out when stuff breaks, saying, hey, something's broken, pay attention, you need to do something about it now. And so we use New Relic, because New Relic is super easy to set up as well. If you've never seen New Relic, you at least got to give it a look. This is, like this response time. You can see that little vertical blue line there, kind of on the right side. That's where we deployed. So if we see a spike after that, then we know, okay, something went wrong. We need to fix that. And here's our error rate. Once again, that same deploy. You see the errors actually before were worse, so we probably fixed some bugs or something like that. So it's really easy to see. And New Relic hooks up with our Campfire, and it tells us something's broken. You have errors above your error threshold. And our ops team has a way of getting notified by these as well. I don't know all the details about that, but there are other solutions as well, Nagios and Ganglia and stuff like that. Whatever you're using, use something to monitor. So whenever you talk about continuous deployment, I've read when people make blog posts, there a whole slew of excuses come out, like we can't do that because of X, Y, Z. So some of the common ones I've seen were more releases would be more pain because releases are painful. But if you're releasing multiple times per day, then releases aren't a big deal. I mean, I don't even know how many times we release a day. I don't even notice when it happens sometimes because, it's such a non-event. No one even freaks out about it, and the rest of the company doesn't even know. Once we transitioned to this, no one even noticed. No one even cared. And I think that was one of the other excuses that people said, skipping to my third point, users or stakeholders won't be cool with it. Like I said, no one at our company even really noticed. They were aware of it, but they're like, okay, whatever, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, most of them, if you think that's a good excuse, you're probably wrong. Your users probably will be okay with it, and there'll be actually less downtime. People think it'll blow up their site more because releases blow up your site all the time. But I mean, when you only have a tiny little release, it's super easy to roll back anyway if you screw it up. So, and then tests are insufficient. If your tests are insufficient, that actually is a valid excuse at first, but obviously there's an easy solution to that. My suggestion to get started, if your tests are not sufficient for doing this, is just commit today to start testing everything. And then also add tests for any new bugs that come up, and make sure are the most critical and changing parts of your app are well tested. If you start with those things, you should be well on your way to having good enough tests to do this. Because then the most critical things are covered, and if anything else breaks, then you just add the tests, and once again, rollbacks are easy, and you'll get there quick enough. Okay, and then if you have, one thing we do is we try to roll out our features incrementally, but sometimes if you roll out a feature before it's done and people see it, that's a problem, right? So there's a gem called rollout, ironically, right? That you can actually hide these new things really easy, and it's super easy to set up again. And we use this all the time when we have something new go out and we only want a certain number of people to see it, or if it's something that could be, a risky rollout, then we put this in front of it so only 5% of our users see it or something like that. Then we increase that number and increase it a little bit more, and it's one configuration change and another quick deploy. And it's super easy to do that. So there's an idea if you can't. If you're trying to release incrementally rather than pushing an entire huge feature all at once, you can test it one piece at a time, even in production, and only have a certain number of people see it, or nobody see it. If you don't want anyone else to see it, you can just have admins see it or something. So some of the benefits of doing this, I guess I kind of covered it, but waste is reduced. So you're no longer having these crazy release deadlines where everyone's trying to get everything ready all at once, and everyone's waiting for the release. And then you have to have a big party afterward because you actually made it happen. You can still have parties, but at least you don't. Yeah, there's a lot less waste because you're not waiting for the release anymore. Fail fast, that's a thing we like to talk about a lot in the Ruby community. This is fail fast implemented in production. If something breaks, you fail really fast, roll it right back immediately, and you go fix it, and then you can try again. And then it encourages working in smaller increments, which there's very obvious benefits of that. Whenever you have a big release that's taken months to put out, and then you have something break, it can sometimes be a real pain to figure out where exactly that happened because so many things changed at once. But when you push only a small increment out at a time, then it's a simple diff, like only 40 lines of code changed in this release, so it should be pretty easy to figure that out. So this is something that has really benefited us a lot. Anytime we roll back, it's almost dead simple to figure out what happened, because you don't have to look at 30 different things that changed at once. So, in conclusion, the result of all this, and this is for you, Mike, more ponies. Yes. I promised ponies in this talk, didn't I? In my abstract. So, and who couldn't use more ponies? Really, come on. So, I think you guys have heard of that guy that was running for president, that guy that has a boot on his head. What's his name? Berman something, right? Maybe you guys haven't heard of him. He said if you vote for him, everyone in America will get a free pony. But here we can get them just by deploying all the time. They'll just show up. That's what happens. So anyway, that's what I've got. Any questions?
What's your experience with that?
Yeah, and that's why I emphasize, we need to have tests that do what our users do, because unit tests aren't exactly what your users do, right? Unit tests are essential and important, but the big thing for us, like you said, is we have to have tests that load the whole browser, whether it's Selenium or what. We're using Acafelos with HTML units, so it's not the best, but it's better than nothing. And so it actually loads all the JavaScript, makes all the AJAX requests, gets the response, clicks on the buttons and all that. And so if you don't have tests that are doing that, you're pretty much going to fail at some point. So it's important to have those kind of tests, yeah. We use Optimizely for a lot of our A/B testing. Some of it is we just do manually to figure out if something's broken, but usually your monitoring should be good enough, I think, in most cases, to see if things are going wrong. Yeah, so he's asking if we're doing A/B testing, if we're rolling out to 10% of our users or whatever. And yeah, we've done some of that rollout, but with Optimizely, I don't know if you've heard of that one, but we use Optimizely quite a bit. Even for our little buttons, if we want to make a button bigger to see if it increases our conversions, we do that all the time. And then we track those users and see if they're clicking more. So yeah, if you want to look up optimize.ly, it's been really good for us. Anyone else? Yeah.
Would you use the same strategy if you're switching to a new Rails version?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, if your monitoring's good and your tests are good, then you should be, that's the main thing here. You just need to find out if something's going to break, if something's going to go wrong. The tests aren't going to be enough by themselves ever. So your monitoring will pick that up, and you're not just going to throw away your old code just because you upgrade to a new version. So if you have to roll back, you just have to make sure your rollback strategy is simple and easy. Obviously, with the whole Rails version change, it's going to be a little more difficult, but that doesn't happen very often. So
I would blue green that.
What's that?
I would blue green that.
You blue-green that? Good idea, yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, one more, sorry.
Yeah, so did you say at your company you guys still have a deploy button, or it's just the test passes?
Yeah, we still do the deploys manually. It's just the cap deploy, and we could put a button in front of it. It's pretty much there, but so, I think when Timothy Fitz he left InView to go to Etsy. When he worked at InView, they had a script that actually would sample the error rates, and then when they deployed, it would sample them again and compare. And the rollbacks were actually automatic. If something broke, it would roll back immediately, and then nobody could deploy or even commit until that fix was done. And so that's the ideal, if you ask me. We haven't gotten there, but I mean, to have it automatic to that level would be pretty sweet. So
a follow-up to his Rails version question, do you guys still ever have the idea of a big deployment, or are you just very comfortable with any deployment is this?
So the question is, do we ever do big deployments, or are we comfortable with where we are? I can't remember the last time we had a big deployment. I mean, I've been at Gold Star for a little over a year, and we used to have some, about a week's or 2 weeks worth of time where we deploy, and we'd have the problems that most people here are probably still dealing with. But I can't remember the last time we deployed anything really big. If you deploy daily, that problem mostly goes away. And if we have to deploy a whole feature at once, we try to do it incrementally, use rollout or something like that, just to see if it's going to break things or whatever. So, cool. All right, thanks, guys.